I'm Calivan and welcome to Bar Better. This series is aimed at beginners and hopes to help new players understand the game. Today we're going to talk about scaling our economy so that we can produce greater numbers of more powerful units and keep up with the opposition as the game goes on. Before we proceed, know that this is a little bit of a divisive subject. There are quite a variety of opinions on the best way to do this, so instead of me providing a recipe for scaling, I'm going to explain the theory behind it and then you'll be able to find your own way forward. Growing your economy is not unique to Bar, it's a feature of pretty much every real-time strategy game out there. The difference with Bar is there isn't really much of a ceiling, and growth is somewhat exponential. The more your economy grows, the faster it grows, and as there's no unit cap and resources are limitless, then you've got every reason to want your economy to reach staggering heights and keep going onward. The best units in the game are immensely powerful and ridiculously expensive, so you'll need to be firing on all cylinders to afford them. Growth generally comes in 3 or 4 stages, and you'll probably want to make sure that you've completed each stage before moving on to the next one. The initial investments required become more expensive in each stage, so they aren't really something that can be reasonably skipped. The first stage is simple: secure your starting metal extractors as quickly as possible. On most maps you'll have 2 or 3 very close to your spawn location, and another 2 or 3 in the local area. You'll probably want to capture the first 3 with your commander, and then once you've got a bit of energy generation on the go and a factory, then use a construction unit and or your commander to secure the others. Once you've done this, you'll be up and running, and have enough income so that you can continually build T1 units from your factory and also expand your energy production with a constructor. Awesome! Now it's time for Phase 2. Unless you're in a specific tech or air position, Phase 2 involves you moving towards the centre of the map and establishing a front line. There will generally be another bunch of metal spots between you and the centre, so your task is to secure these. If you're doing particularly well with your initial engagement, you might be able to push your opponent back some and gain a little more metal. Now that the front line is established, you're holding your ground and have built metal extractors on all of those lovely metal spots. Your next stage of growth is to upgrade to advanced metal extractors, or AMEXs for short. You'll need a T2 construction unit for this, which might mean you have to wait until you can get a T2 factory up, or if other teammates are ahead, you might be able to exchange some metal for one, or even get one for free. Once this is complete and the majority of your safe extractors are upgraded, it's time to move into the final phase: dedicated energy conversion. The reason I call it dedicated is, from my point of view, the energy converter is a dual purpose structure, and its use in the early stages of the game is very different from its use in the later stages. You see, energy converters are rubbish and give you a very poor return on investment compared to metal extractors. It takes 70 energy to generate a single point of metal, so with an average wind speed of 10 you would need to spend 280 metal to build enough turbines to power one. If you do the maths, then you'll see you need to wait almost 6 minutes to break even, and 12 to double your metal investment. This explains why it's so important to get down your metal extractors quickly in the early game, as those pay for themselves in around 20 seconds and will double or triple your investment in under a minute. That doesn't mean that converters are totally useless in the early game. Because of the fluctuations in wind, you'll often find yourself overflowing with energy, so a converter or 3 can make sure that any excess you have isn't going to waste. Your requirements will also change depending on exactly what you are constructing, so yes, they do have value. But there is a difference, and in the final phase of economy scaling they switch roles, and instead of providing a handy way to make use of your excess, they become your primary source of metal production. The higher tech energy structures, most notably the Advanced Fusion Reactor or AFUS, produce more energy per point of metal invested than any of the early generators. They also have a smaller footprint, so you can fit plenty of them in a tight space and construct them with a considerable speed by focusing your build power. With a low metal cost and high wind speeds on some maps, wind can still be comparable, but it's a lot easier to find space for 10 advanced fusion reactors than it is for 2,000 turbines. It's also worth remembering that wind has inherent risks. Creating storage on that scale really upsets the cost calculation, and without it you're essentially gambling that it won't drop to near zero when you need it the most. T2 also gives you the ability to build advanced converters that turn 600 energy into 10.3 metal, a better ratio than standard converters. The mechanics of scaling in this final stage pretty much come down to this. You build an advanced fusion reactor, that grants you 3000 energy. This means you can build 5 advanced converters and turn that into just north of 50 metal. Now that sounds great, doesn't it? But that doesn't mean you should immediately start building an advanced fusion reactor the second you've completed your final round of metal converters. But what it does mean is that you should start to dramatically increase your energy production and then use advanced converters to turn that back into metal. Starting with an APHIS has 2 problems. The first is the colossal cost. It's not easy to find the best part of 10,000 metal laying around, and you won't see any return whatsoever until it's completed and your converters are also online. The second is it also has a titanic build cost, probably one of the highest build costs proportionate to its construction cost. This means that even if you do already have some serious income or savings, it's going to need a lot of constructors to finish in a sensible time. It's generally better to use other methods as a stepping stone. The standard approach is to use regular fusion reactors. They do cost more metal per point of energy generation, but each one requires a far smaller investment and only requires a fraction of the build power. It will take 3 of them to rival an APHIS, but the benefit here is that you'll be seeing some return the moment that the first one is complete. The figures work out something like this. With an advanced construction bot and 10 construction turrets, it takes 2.5 minutes to complete an APHIS. That same amount of build power can make a fusion reactor in just over 30 seconds. By the time an APHIS would have been completed, you could convert that fusion's energy output to over 1500 metal. If you've got a second fusion queued up after, that's going to arrive 30 seconds later, and that's another 1200 metal before the APHIS completes. Add both of those figures together and that pretty much offsets the cost difference. A bigger benefit is that if the game state changes a minute after you make the decision to dedicate your economy to scaling, and you suddenly need to start producing a lot of units very quickly, you've got plenty of resources to do so. If you had decided to go straight for an APHIS, you would be in big trouble. The key question about scaling is how much of your economy you can dedicate to it. If you dedicate more, you'll scale faster, but you'll also have fewer combat units and defences, and you might be overrun because of it. This is tricky, and learning to read the game state correctly is one of the primary skills that separates average players from great players. This will only come from experience, and there's no magic formula I can impart that you can take into your games. This is why scouting is so important. If you've got a lot of combat power and your opponent does not, then perhaps it's time to put some pressure on them while you spend the next few minutes dedicating your economy to scaling. If the situation is reversed, then it's probably not safe to do so. If your opponent appears to be spending a great deal on defensive structures, this could also be a good time to focus on scaling your economy. Those static defences can't attack you, so you'll probably be safe. Another common situation is that you've just successfully defended against a large push. If your side of the map is scattered with wrecks that you can reclaim, then that influx of metal could be the key to your next reactor. Essentially, if you've got enough combat power to defend yourself, but not enough to have a reasonable chance of pushing and causing serious damage to your opponent, then it's probably time to scale. This is why you generally want to apply a lot of pressure when the enemy is weak, as their apparent lack of units is a good indicator that they're busy funneling their resources into their own economy. Things aren't always that clear, so sometimes you'll be forced to do a bit of both, splitting your resources between production and economic improvement. Mechanically, it's pretty simple. Tell half of your constructors to assist your factory, and then tell the other half to assist the unit building your fusion reactor. And as long as they are all on the same priority, your income will be split 50-50 between units and growth. Let's see how some of this works in practice by checking out a replay. So we're not going to watch the whole thing, I'm not much of a commentator anyway, so instead we're just going to look at a few key moments that highlight some of the things we spoke about earlier.
Battle started.
So the first thing we spoke about was stage 1, this just involves securing your metal extractors. Your commander generates 30 energy a second, alongside with the 1000 you start with. This is enough to secure the 3 metal spots around you with 3 metal extractors without building anything else. You will sometimes see some players build a single solar collector or wind turbine first. This is because until recently the commander only generated 25 energy a second, so you would have to either wait a little bit for your third extractor or build something else first. So these players still know what they're doing, they're just not quite up to date on some of the most recent changes, but most people have figured out you can go straight into 3 metal extractors now. To complete stage 1, what our players need to do is capture the few extra metal spots that are in their immediate local area. To get the first stage completed, these players will be getting out some construction vehicles and then they'll be using those to secure the initial metal extractors around their starting position. Remember, you want to capture these early, so it's best to focus on that. As an example, this player here is building extra wind turbines with his commander. I think it probably would have been better to boost out this construction vehicle instead, because he does have a little bit of energy in the bank. He's going to use this construction vehicle to capture some of the metal nodes in his immediate area, and you'll see pretty much everyone else is doing exactly the same thing. They're building a constructor, and then they're sending it to capture the metal nodes immediately adjacent to where they start. Now, if you're a frontline player, which is pretty much everyone on this map apart from these 2 positions here, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use your commander to push up to the front line and capture some metal spots along the way. Your commander's got lots of build power, so he's good at this. You also want him on the front line anyway, so he might as well be doing something useful on his long walk up there, and this is going to allow you to secure a lot more metal. Now, you will see that some players will be tempted to leave their commander back at base and use these build power to sort of jumpstart their economy by building lots of things like wind turbines and construction turrets. But really, you don't need to do this. You're not going to have much metal near the start of the game, and you're certainly not going to have enough metal to support a commander, 2 construction turrets and 3 construction bots. So the best thing to do is get a few turbines out, and then get walking towards the front line and capture that extra metal. And we will see differences in the income of these players because of that approach. If we have a quick look at the statistics tab, this player here has gathered something like 1.4k metal, whereas the blue player we looked at earlier is already on 1.7k. So because he's just gone out a little bit earlier and he's not been quite as greedy with his wind turbine production, he's already some 200-300 metal ahead of this player. That's a decent amount of combat units and would make quite a big difference on the front line in these early stages of the game. So now that we're coming up to the 5th or 6th minute, you'll see that the second stage is almost complete. Pretty much all of our players have pushed forward and captured all of the metal nodes on the way up to the front line. A few have pushed a little bit further forward and denied the metal from the enemy. This is an especially good thing to do, as it means you'll always be slightly ahead. So stage 3 will be a bit slower because players are going to need a T2 construction unit before they can upgrade to their advanced metal extractors. We shouldn't really be seeing much in the way of energy converters at this point. Like I said, you don't really want to try and leapfrog over stages. It's more important that you focus your resources on upgrading your metal extractors than it is trying to build a converter economy at this stage. Some players are building a lot more converters, but honestly, this is a real waste. There's just not enough wind power out to power these. You'll notice here that even with all these turbines and a very strong wind speed, not one of these converters is actually doing anything, so all that build time and energy was wasted. This is the wrong approach for a frontliner at the early stages of the game. He's focusing way too hard on his economy. He's got himself 2 construction turrets, 4 construction bots and his commander continually building to try and support this early energy converter economy. Now it is providing him with an extra 20 metal a second, but he's only funneling that straight back into the economy. So rather than actually getting ahead of the game, what he's doing is leaving his teammates a bit weak. Got a handful of rocket bots at the front at the moment, and that's not going to help if one of these players decides to push really hard, which we'll see happen in a few minutes. Everyone else seems to be upgrading at a reasonable speed. You see there's not many energy converters come out yet, because like I said, there's no point launching into a big time energy converter economy at this stage. Some players will have a few just to manage that overflow. This is totally fine and a really good idea, but as we can see, Blue is focusing all of his efforts on defending his frontline position and also upgrading his metal extractors. He knows that's the priority and that's why he's probably quite far ahead. Over here we can see quite a heavy amount of economy reasonably early into the game, but this is because his opponent is playing very defensively. He knows that his opponent has built lots of walls, built lots of defences and doesn't have a lot of units. This means he feels pretty safe, and as such he's confident enough to spend all of his resources on pumping out an early economy upgrade by going straight into an early APHIS. Now, I'm not quite sure I really like this play. He's got a single fusion up. I think it would probably be better to get 2, 3 or maybe even 4 fusions up before going for that Aphis. He did have to eat his Tech 2 lab to build it, which means if there was a sudden push, then he would really struggle to get units out in a hurry and probably be in quite a lot of trouble. We can see here that this lane's really starting to struggle. This is the problem with investing far too much into your economy too early. Because this player has tried to go into a big time energy converter economy early, he's not been producing any units, and that's why this front line completely folded earlier. He does have a few hands out now, but it's too little too late. This is the problem with going too hard on your economy too early. By neglecting to back up the front line properly, you leave you and your teammates wide open to attack. Okay, so let's recap. Scaling your economy is vital if you want to stay ahead of the curve, but it's important to do so in an efficient way and not to jump ahead of yourself. In terms of time, resources and build requirements, each stage is more expensive than the last. Don't try and move into T2 until you've secured as many metal spots as possible, and don't attempt to launch into a big time converter economy until all of your advanced metal extractors are complete. Making these mistakes can stall your growth, tie up all of your resources with half-finished investments and leave you wide open to attack. That said, there's nothing wrong with a few converters in the early game to make use of any excess energy you have. Also, remember to scale your build power at the same rate as your economy. Don't invest too much too early as it's just a waste, but instead anticipate your needs for the immediate future and create additional constructors accordingly. Finally, play lots of games. Getting a feel for the right time to dedicate a large portion of your income to scaling is something that only comes with experience. Also, games are fun, so playing lots of them is never a chore. Well, thanks for watching. If you've got any questions, leave them in a comment or on the Discord and I'll do my best to help. If you found this video useful, then click the like button, and if you want more of this sort of thing, then subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you back for the next one.